Hey guys, my name's Specimen and today we're doing a Sunset Wanderers card review. Is this card worth it? Should you be playing it? How do you get it? All those sorts of things. Well, I've already done a video covering all of the Witchercon event rewards, but you can get access to the premium form of this card for free just by playing 100 cards in Gwent. That's it. So simple, you can do it in less than an hour, I'm sure, and you get this card. It's a neutral, you can play it in every faction, so that's always a benefit. Now, this card is really interesting. I've been having a blast playing it, and it starts at the leftmost position of your hand. It starts at the left side of your hand guaranteed, so you always draw this card, and then at the beginning of your turn, it's going to slowly work its way forward to the right-hand side of your hand, bit like the journey that it references here to the edge of the world that's of course in the first season of the Netflix series, as well as in the Witcher short stories. And at the end of your turn, if you have not passed and there are no cards to the right, then it's going to summon itself from your hand to a random allied row and draw a card. So while it might seem okay, this gets to like 5, 6, 7 points in some situations, that's not that good. It's important to remember that these are almost free points. So Dandelion Poet is a card at 11 provisions, which does see some competitive play in certain decks. Not the most common card, admittedly, but it was in beta one of the most staple cards. Because of provisions being introduced later on, it's not quite as staple, but this ability is just a very, very strong one. It also has synergy with cards like Snowdrop. There's leaders with tactical decision, the discard package as well that synergizes with it even more because you can put more cards to the right hand side of your hand when you draw them. Also important to remember, if you pass with Sunset Wanderers at the far right of your hand, it's not going to summon, you're going to draw some more cards, therefore increasing the points of Sunset Wanderers. So how good is this card? Well, I think I can say with confidence it is the best card in the game. That's right, this card right now is the best card in the game. 10 out of 10. Now, it can be a lot better in specific decks. We're going to touch on these decks in the video where we're really building around Sunset Wanderers, but if you're a beginner player, this should be in every single one of your decks. The only real reason, in my opinion, not to run this card is if you're playing a Devotion deck. A Devotion deck is a deck that does not play any neutrals, but if you've got a non-Devotion deck, you should almost certainly be squeezing this card in because it just plays for an incredible amount of points and you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. It thins your deck by 1 by drawing a card as well, which is very comparable to something like a Roach or a Knickers. So if you're playing any deck that wants to thin, this is the best way of doing it. Knickers is a very popular card in 8 provisions. Lots of decks utilize this because in Gwent you only get to play 16 cards out of the 25 in your deck. So cards which thin your deck. In other words, this card is kind of playing for free. Sunset Wanderers are just very, very powerful and they're free points. It's definitely worth mentioning with Sunset Wanderers that you can see when your opponent has this card in your hand if you're looking carefully enough. There's a subtle little bit of movement in your opponent's hand, and that's obviously going to be relevant. If you're playing this and your opponent is eagle-eyed, they're going to know that this card is in your hand, so look out for that. We're starting off with White Frost, and this deck is a juice. I've spent a long time building this one. I know Payabol is considering playing something who's the Gwent World Champion, something very, very similar to this. We're using Portal onto the Onel Conquerors, and the idea here with Sunset Wanderers is it's just a really good value play. In round 2, if you can keep Sunset Wanderers in round 1, let's say you win, you keep the Sunset Wanderers, you play your Portal, you play maybe one other card like a Phantom or a Dora Grey, whatever it might be, and then the Sunset Wanderers comes out on top of your Portal. You can just have an incredible soft push where your opponent is forced to commit a lot of really good gold cards or go down in cards round 3. The reason Sunset Wanderers works so well in this deck is, first of all, it's a non-Devotion deck, and Monsters just has a really tough time fitting in high-end golds. If you look at the options for Monsters, they're honestly pretty lackluster. So Sunset Wanderers works with a thinning archetype where you're not playing a Neuromancy, you're just playing Maxi for that little bit of consistency, and you're trying to cycle through your deck. You've already got cards like Winter Queen, Maddock that are working in a similar fashion where they're being summoned from the deck, and Sunset Wanderers is just a perfect fit in this list. No direct synergy, but the card is still great even without synergy, so just wait till we see the decks that are built around this card. Northern Realms probably not the best deck for this card. However, that's just because Northern Realms enjoys playing Devotion, the Carrack Marines being a key example of a good Devotion payoff. But Pincer Maneuver has some direct synergy with this card because Pincer Maneuver as a lead ability is going to be drawing cards to the right hand side, therefore meaning that the Sunset Wanderers is going to be passing more cards and getting more points. Added to that, Istrid as well is a new card. Of course, you might know him from the Netflix series that has the ability to draw multiple cards, and again, that's just going to help improve the points on your Sunset Wanderers. This is definitely not the most competitive deck. The White Frost deck I shared with you, I think, is a much better deck than this, but it's a lot of fun and a really cool way of playing. It's a really cool way of playing Sunset Wanderers in Northern Realms. I've done a whole video on this deck, so you can go check that out if you're interested. Up next, we have Squirtle, probably the worst faction in the game on current power level, but this is certainly the best way to play it, and Sunset Wanderers is right at home in this deck. Previously, this deck was running Knickers, and Knickers is just like a scaled down version of Sunset Wanderers that thins your deck, plays for free. Knickers is 3 points for 8 provisions. Sunset Wanderers is going to be probably 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points for 11 provisions, so certainly worth those 3 extra provisions. It's a control heavy deck using cards like Heatwave, Becca's Rockside, and the reason for playing Nature's Gift is for every single nature card you get, you're going to be spawning a Wandering Treant. So we've got Rebuke, Circle of Life, Caresses, Hamadryad being a really crucial card in this one as well. If you can give this card Vitality, you can get a lot of value, and the Sorceress of Dol Blathanna is a way of playing even more special cards despite it being a unit. This means your Gourd can go absolutely through the roof when you're playing a Neuromancy, as well as Shaping Nature, 2 Echo cards. Gourd is probably going to be bigger in this deck than he could be anywhere else in the game. Up next, we have Reckless Flurry. Reckless Flurry is a very popular meta deck, very control heavy, quite similar to the White Frost one in many ways. Sunset Wanderers, again, finds itself right at home in this deck. It's got the Portal, very similar to the White Frost deck, but you're playing the Fish Flappers, one of my favorite combo, I'm sure many of you guys know. You're using the Mega Scopes onto the Greatsword. There's a few things you might want to change around here. I've gone for a Northern Wind and a Moondust. This is going to mean you've got the Banish Bomb onto things like the ship. You've got the Moondust onto defenders, and I've also put in a Jengi Threat, which is going to synergize quite nicely with the leader to get that lock. You also, there are some other SK decks. I've uploaded one on my YouTube, which is using Boat Builders and the discard package, so look out for that as well. Certainly worth trying the discard package with this card, but for this one, it just fits right into the previous. This was the best meta deck from the previous season. Sunset Wanderers is going to slot just in there perfectly. Up next, for Nilfgaard, we have the best deck in the game. Simple as that. It's a pretty unpopular deck with the community because of how strong and oppressive it is. There's many ways you can use Sunset Wanderers. If you want to have a little bit more decency, you could go for a hyper thin motive. That is also a video on my channel, but for this one, it's the Cloggers. The Cloggers deck is thinning it massively, and then it's clogging your opponent up with cards such as Coated Weapons, such as Viper Witches. You're going to thin your deck a ton, and then you're going to have a massive Colgrim, which is going to be sat behind a defender. If your defender gets answered, you can renew your defender, you can Letho your defender, and if nothing happens, then you can just Letho your Colgrim. You've got 2 Colgrims, and then you can renew a 5-point Colgrim in the 3rd round. With this deck, you're really just looking to win round 1, clog your opponent up nice and easily. Again, Defender, Colgrim, you know the rest. This deck is overpowered, it's broken, and Sunset Wanderers is a fantastically overpowered addition to this deck. Decided in the end not to go for a Syndicate deck. Just wasn't really confident sharing anything with you at this moment in time. Sunset Wanderers doesn't seem like the best fit for Syndicate, and if you're a newer player anyway, then it's not going to be a faction you're interested in. So as the weeks go on, if I do make any decks with Sunset Wanderers in Syndicate, which I'm sure I will update the description, so make sure you check that out if you have not done so already. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. What do you think of Sunset Wanderers, and is there any decks that I've not talked about that you think this card really suits well? Thanks so much for watching. See you on the next video.